Now, if you're like me, your time is limited and your time is valuable, and the amount of time you have to spend on creating habitat improvements for deer has to be used wisely. And even myself, I'm a whitetail professional. This is what I do for a living. I'm with clients in the field 60 to 70 days a year around the country. Try to write 150 articles, maybe publish a book a year, get out 100 videos. And I love to spend time with my family and my friends. And by the time you X all that out of the equation, there just seems to not be a lot of time left over for whitetail habitat improvement. So that being said, it's really important to use your time wisely. And throughout the last 30 some years of doing this, there's 5 things that I've found, 5 habitat improvement projects that you can do in the off season that I've found will give you the most bang for your buck and help you use your time wisely. Now, if you're familiar with this grass around me, this is a great one that you can work on. It's pretty easy to do. I'll leave that one for last though. First one, waterholes. I love whitetail waterholes. If you have dry bedding areas, meaning that deer are in a bedding area, there's no water readily accessible. When they're sitting in their bedding areas, they love to eat browse, briars, woody shrub tips, and woody regeneration, hardwood regeneration, acorns, and all of that means there's not a lot of moisture content. And so when they're sitting dry all day in their bedding areas, a lot of times the first thing they want to do in the afternoon on the way to their afternoon food source is to take a drink of water. So by offering a small water hole, small pond, especially a pond meaning a 20-foot in diameter hole of water or smaller, I like to be very precise because I like to set up and use all these improvements for bow hunting and enhancing bow hunting improvements. Water hole can be a great feature. It's something that's easy to do, and we have lots of articles and videos that illustrate how to do that effectively. But a water hole can be an outstanding spot for not only a deer to hit on the way to an afternoon food source, but of course cruising bucks. You always know when the rut's starting when you start getting pictures over water holes of cruising bucks in at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Otherwise, they really love hitting those water holes in the afternoon, but a great, easy habitat improvement that you can make. Secondly, mock scrape. I love mock scrapes. One of the things about a mock scrape is that I like to put a camera on it, put a camera on several mock scrapes, and that camera in that location, we have one right over here. 3 food plots out here. We have 1 mock scrape for this whole valley system. That mock scrape, I believe, attracts every buck that'll come into this valley, and we get its picture taken. So we get to collect the pictures of all these bucks that come in October, November, and December. We can see when our daytime pictures are peaking for bucks. We can tell deer numbers from one year to the other. It really doesn't matter what deer you have in May, June, July, August, September. You can't influence that herd. You can't hunt that herd. You can't have any fun with that herd. It really doesn't tell you how your property is doing either. But when you get those pictures in October, November, and especially November, they tell you a great deal about your habitat, your efforts, how your hunting season's going, your effectiveness for getting on and off your property non-invasively. So by having a mock scrape, I feel that you can use the power of 1 mock scrape, 2 mock scrapes in a given area, put a trail camera on it, and our Access trail camera showed us a lot right over here, and it gave us a lot of intel, but most of all, it tells us that our property is peaking in October, November, and that's what we like. Great off-season habitat improvement. I like to focus mock scrape. We start ours usually in June, July, and get them going. I pee in a scrape to start it, so not a maybe a visual you want, but at the same time, it's very effective. I'll rake it up a little bit, and that's literally all I've done to start my mock scrape since the early 2000s. I've written about that for many years, and very effective. Start those mock scrapes in May, June, July, and go from there. One of the things that we like doing here in the coming weeks during January and February is creating bedding areas and travel corridors. So a bedding area, great time to get out in the woods and find defined bedding areas that might be an acre in size, a half acre in size, or smaller, that you say, I want the deer bedded here, so every time I come on the property, I know these deer are bedded in this location. Folks really, really try to ignore the hoopla about creating canopies over bedding areas, tying down brush. You need to get timber on the ground. I like creating hinge cuts that are waist high. That puts the food and the cover at deer level. Think about it, if you create this canopy that's this high, the food's well above the deer's head, which wastes a hinge cut in my opinion. At the same time, the cover's not concealing that deer from the side. They can still see each other, they can still see you coming. So if I had a canopy bedding area up on a bench right there, we'd be in full visibility of that deer right now. As opposed to putting those cuttings down on the ground, one of the most effective things you can do, knock a half acre of timber down, clean it up so deer can easily move all the way through it, maze and pocket it so there's no dead ends or very few dead ends, and the deer will use it. You put the browse at their level, you put the cover at that level, and you can waste a lot of time creating canopies and tie downs. It might take you an hour to make the size of a pickup bed, bedding area, or a couple pickup beds. I'd rather spend that time running a tank of gas, knocking an acre of timber down, cleaning it up, and making an actual bedding area the deer will use, especially during October through March. Second thing, a travel corridor. During that time of year, this time of year, January, February, great time to make a travel corridor, creating those low hinge cuts and bringing those deer right past your tree stands. So a lot of my tree stands out here have travel corridors cut into them so that we can actually expect to use those hinge cuts to not only provide cover and food, but to direct traffic right to 2 or 3 of our adjacent bow stands that we're trying to set up a strategy for in that area. So first off, Waterholes, incredible. Secondly, creating mock scrapes, even putting a camera on it and taking a census. Third, creating those bedding areas, half acre, acre in size, specifically where you want those deer to be when you walk into the woods, pulling them away from your access routes. I hate to put bedding areas on the borders of properties unless it's an area where it joins a high traffic area, hunting pressure area where I know those people are going to be up to that border and it'll push deer further into my property. But typically you want those bedding areas in your core area somewhere where you can keep those deer at a large percentage of your property. Know they're there every time you walk in and out of the property. And then fourth, those travel corridors are just exceptional for connecting those bedding areas to a water hole, a mock scrape, to an afternoon food source, food plot, and really directing traffic and making sure they go by your stand for a bow shot. Now fifth, but not least, this switchgrass. Switchgrass is the only whitetail grass that you can plant for deer and use as habitat. Sure, you can have big blue stem, little blue stem Indian grass, put it out for the summertime, get some fawning activity. But then when that cover lays down and those deer leave, the wildlife that depends on that grass, like rabbits and pheasant leave, then what are you left with in November, December, January, February, March? You're left with nothing. Switchgrass is the only grass that's going to stand up to our north half of the country, especially in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even northern Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota. You need switchgrass to stand up to the stress of wintertime, the snows, and most importantly, you can actually offer cover from late October, November, December, January, February, March, when deer, rabbits, small game, and pheasants need it the most. This right here, we planted this switchgrass. This is 1-year-old switchgrass. In fact, 1 summer old. We planted this in the beginning of summer. We use chemicals to limit the weeds that are in here, so it's coming in very clean. We used a Genesis 3 drill from RTP Outdoors, which you can see the switchgrass growing in rows. It is beautiful. Some of the switchgrass is approaching 5 feet tall. I'm pretty short. I'm 5'9" on a good day. So you can see some of the switchgrass is starting to get pretty high. Next year we expect it to be 6-7 feet tall. And we're really excited because we don't have a lot of cover for rabbits out here. You know, this cover disappears out around us, the goldenrod and ragweed. And so, you know, really easy for those rabbits to get picked off by the birds of prey. But we actually have switchgrass out here and we have rabbit pellets all over the place. So I'm really excited to see the rabbits using this. We're actually putting structure out in this field where there's really not much else out here. This has been a fallow field since the 50s, and this is what's growing up. So early successional growth is a great buzzword, but when it grows into something like this, there's not much to it. You're not going to support a lot of wildlife. It really just depends on the ground. There's not great ground here. Switchgrass is a great feature, a great habitat improvement that you can add to your land. And sure, you're putting it in here for whitetail, but don't be surprised if you actually attract rabbits, pheasant, and it's not all about the deer, and we're trying to add some structure out here for a lot of different wildlife species. So those 5 off-season whitetail habitat improvements are my top 5. Those are my favorite ones throughout the decades that I've used, that you can promote a lot of success, not only for your hunting, but for your herd management strategies and goals. 1, starting with water holes. 2, mock scrapes. 3, bedding areas. 4, travel corridors. And then last but not least, the switchgrass. We're real excited about this one because obviously this needs some structure out here. This switchgrass is going to make a huge difference out in these fields for not only whitetails but all wildlife species. So enjoy the off season. There's a lot you can do, and I hope you'll find that you can add these to some of your land and add some of these improvements to your land and really enjoy it this coming hunting season.